Hello and welcome to ChatDPS. So this week has unveiled the fact that Optus are now going to be liable for what is considered to be the largest penalty in Australian history. I think it's 251.3 million. And Robert, Adam and myself thought it would be a good idea to go back and look at some data that was released earlier in the year through the Talus report, the Talus Data Threat Report, to see if what's being predicted is indeed what's happening out there in the marketplace. So if you want to hold on to your hats, this is going to be a fairly substantial shift through several key areas of cybersecurity as we go through some of the key points that were raised in the data threat report earlier this year. So in truth, and on the face of it, facts are still facts. This data threat report appears to uphold an awful lot of it. It's just the way that some of it is actually put forward as a fact, because quite some of it is actually sort of like spearing itself into fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which is an old way of selling security, I guess. I mean, one of the ways that we want to see the direction going in is for people to feel comfortable and trusted and part of a team when it comes down to the security of the data within their own organization. So anyway, let's get on with it. Let's talk about AI security to begin with. Robert, there was a couple of things on here. So 70% cite pace and AI evolution as a top risk. And this was done in the data was obviously from the end of last year and it was released in February. 61% say that their systems are under attack already. There's been some cases, yeah?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been a hot topic the last few weeks. And as we know, with anything when it comes to these frontier models, they're basically getting released. There's a new one every week. And if it's not from the major players like OpenAI and Anthropic, maybe not so much Google, because they're going through a bit of a restructure. So that's another topic. But the Chinese models as well, also getting released. And so that it's a real AI arms race. But the big topic has been these frontier models attacking other organizations, getting out of their sandbox. The big one was OpenAI and Hugging Face, and it showed. I mean, the thing is that the detail they don't go into. They give a very sort of detailed timeline of what happened, and it's quite interesting to see how these agents work together to get onto the internet and get out, and then find vulnerabilities that allow them to go attack Hugging Face. I mean, it's interesting stuff. And there is a black hat presentation they did a couple of days ago. So recommend that. There's some really good stuff in there. But they're not saying anything about what guardrails they put in place or not, because when you look at the timeline, this started off in May. They set up this new model in May and gave it some what they call impossible tasks. And it wasn't until mid-July that it started attacking Hugging Face, because it went through a whole number of steps before then. And it's like, what were you guys doing? And this comes down to governance, risk, compliance, people, process, technology. Yeah. What were you doing in those 2+ months in terms of controlling that risk? So that's the kind of broader thing. And obviously Anthropic have mentioned this. I think Grok have talked about this. There's been hacks in the UK, similar sorts of stuff. So the capabilities of these AI models to go attack is getting well documented now. What we aren't really seeing, and this is something OpenAI mentioned, was the ability to automatically defend against this. So there's talk about slowing down the frontier models, but also constantly doing autonomous red team, blue team. So there's a lot of discussion going on in this space. It's changing very rapidly, but then bringing it back to these stats and the fact that this is outpacing governance. What are boards doing? So what are boards doing to actually deal with this sort of risk? What sort of questions are they asking based on what's happening out there in the external world? What are they doing, and what changes are they making? And just to kind of, sorry, I've got the platform here, but another sort of notable thing is that the ASD and the AICD put a publication out in the last week, putting some questions forward that a board can look at to look at these risks. Some of it's just kind of fundamental stuff, getting your basics in place. Some of it is also, based on what's happening with these frontier models, What are the risks? Has the risk of the business increased? What sort of data could be under attack? What do we need to do to protect it? So this whole topic of the evolution of AI and these frontier models and what it can actually do to organizations, it's clearly far outpacing anything that businesses seem to be able to do, and far outpacing anything that governments can do.
So Adam, I mean, I'm looking at this and listening to what Robert's saying, and it quite clearly is that, I mean, we've known for a long time that governance has been underfunded in organizations. It's not been a discipline that's been held in high regard at a board level. There are some more stunning examples as well, aren't there?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, the first thing to pay attention to when it comes to the news we're seeing around AI attacks is this is a little bit of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt selling happens. And I know you said it's the old way of selling, but we have seen quite some new tactics around it. But there's two sides to the coin, because if you can do this, so if AI is able to do autonomous attack, then, and Robert alluded to it briefly, it can do autonomous defend. So one thing that is a guarantee in this world right now is if an organization is going to stick their head in the sand and just wait and see what's happening with AI, it's going to just blow straight over the top of them. And I think, I've been quoted quite a few times lately saying, if you sit back and say, we're not going to adopt AI because we're a bit scared of it, then you're not going to have a news crew rock up and go, well, look, here's Bill and Ben, and Bill and Ben are the only people who didn't use frontier modeling, and they're the ones who didn't get attacked. And that's, referring to if, when the data leaks out the back, if one of these platforms is breached. But the pace is just phenomenal. If you look back to where we were in December last year, so December 2025, so from the dawn of time to December 2025, the progress we made in technology has now been exponentially increased to today. And I was only 3 weeks ago standing on a stage saying, or 4 weeks ago, standing on a stage saying, we have not seen an AI born attack that was launched in AI, carried out in AI, and executed in AI. And now we're talking about Hugging Face. And, we had another entertaining one that we were sharing between us today as well. So it's definitely a term we're going to get sick of hearing, is a brave new world when it comes to AI. But there's two sides to the coin. It is the defense side is probably even stronger. Like, there's been examples recently that I've been using where I've had a couple of emails where I go, all right, this is a new approach, someone like a cold approach. So I'm hovering over things, taking screenshots, sending it into my AI and going, all right, do the background research on this organization, this email address, come back and tell me anything you can find in open source and recon. And then using that to determine whether or not it's safe to open that email versus I'm going to go by the reputation that's been given to me by a legacy email platform.
Yeah. So I guess the question, guys, is going to be around, we've leapfrogged everything here, and in terms of who's responsible. So it used to be that boards said, well, we've got a CISO for that, or we've got a CTO or a CIO or whatever, and it's their fault because they haven't been doing their job. Now all of a sudden it's been pointed out, ASD, AICD, they're all saying the same thing. It's a board level responsibility, yeah? And it's a board responsibility, yeah?
We're seeing a role now just popped up that is Chief of AI. So there's a new role.
Yeah.
That's who we're going to throw under the bus, apparently. Yeah, that didn't exist. That didn't exist in December last year. At least it was. We heard murmurings, but I think at a conference in just over 2 weeks, I'm introducing someone who is the Chief of AI.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
It's. Do you know what conference that is, Nick, that I'm talking about?
I think I have an inkling.
Yes. No plugs here.
Oh, we don't mind doing a plug for them. I think they're great. It's a great organization, and it's got a worthwhile clause, and it's local, and
the topic this year is sovereignty. So,
right,
so we're ahead of the time. Wade was well ahead of the time. He called out that it was sovereignty back in September last year. So
that's all good. So,
Yeah.
look, moving on to the next piece then, I mean, I think that we wanted to talk about identities become the new perimeter. Adam, can you lead us off in that regard, please? Because there's the stats were really saying something quite extraordinary in this regard, yeah?
Yeah. So now because my brain's got so many things on it, and I knew this one I'd remember because I've got a 7-year-old. So 67%.
67%. 6-7.
So 67% increase in credential theft and stolen secrets. I think that's very optimistic. I think the numbers are much higher. If we look at in ransomware, and ransomware has actually gone up a little bit. We're seeing ransomware at back to 2021 levels. March this year was the highest we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And they say that in 93% of ransomware cases, there were stolen credentials. So I think that's going to be a bigger number in reality. And then you've got MFA related failures. I absolutely think we've got to the point of MFA fatigue, and it's becoming easier to fool people with MFA fatigue.
Yeah, my concern there, of course, is the fact that, I mean, you can have every system under the sun. If it's not set up correctly, it's not going to perform, right? So, I mean, Robert, I'd like to go back to you on this one, because this is a critical governance issue. Lots of organizations have bought lots of tools, and what's become very clear is the fact that hardly any of them are configured optimally. They're all not all, but all is a very big number, but many of them are suboptimal in terms of how they've actually been implemented and what they're actually dialed up to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, this comes down to understanding not just your data, but your assets and what you've accumulated over the years, and particularly legacy. So let's look at legacy. We just saw Telstra got taken down, but with legacy servers. So, that should be a prompt to board and C-suite to go, okay, so we've just seen Telstra taken down. So Optus are going to be up for something like $250 million. It'll be less than that, but it's a significant fine. Telstra are going to get something similar come through in the next 6 or 12 months. That should be a wake-up call to go, what legacy equipment have we got out there? Legacy apps, legacy services. Are we right sized? Do we need to optimize? Do we need to drop some of these services? How are they being used? And actually do a bit of a spring clean. I know it's still winter, but do a bit of a spring clean and actually, see what it is you're using and what it is you're monitoring. And, there's an opportunity here to do a little bit of a spring clean, a house clean of your business.
This is what we call security by obscurity. Like the amount of organizations we go into, and they just do not have a grasp on what software, hardware, security perimeter they're running, what their latest updates were, what firmwares they're on. 25 active war rooms, and each one, their firewall rules would be running in the high hundreds, if not thousands. And there's no way you need that many rules on your firewall. There's some people out there now, and I had someone who I've known for quite a long time, is a brilliant security mind. Shout out James Tin. He's now commented on something I said on not Facebook, not that one. Hugging Face got me thinking Facebook. Something on LinkedIn last week, and he was talking about, with identity and access locked down right and zero trust networking architecture, the firewall's effectively redundant. I've asked him to dive deeper into that one with me. So we'll probably put out a joint paper on that. But part of this talk track is like 52% of organizations are saying that their identity and access management is their most pressing issue. Again, I think that's a really optimistic figure, because I find it very difficult to walk into any organization and talk to them about IDAM, IGA, so identity governance, or identity and access, or privilege access management. And a lot of organizations rushed to implement something without building a blueprint to it first.
Yeah.
So they're not mature enough to accept it. And they did this because the insurance companies got a little bit of a hard-on for this kind of stuff and went, get your PAM sorted or you're not going to get covered. So a lot of organizations have claimed they've got it covered. One thing I do have a serious concern about is if there's an attack and the cyber insurance is called upon, there might be a lot of organizations finding they've been paying premiums for years and they're not going to be covered because there's something in the clause where they're not doing the right thing. So definitely I see identity as being a major hole in a lot of organizations, especially in their governance, risk and compliance infrastructure.
Yeah.
And especially in the way that they're approaching security, because I think, as you said, it's 2026. There's a lot of shit sitting on the shelves. There are a lot of tools. We played a lot of whack-a-mole. And I think that it's time to do a bit of a spring clean and get back to what's required. And identity and access is a big part of that.
Yeah, so pick one tool that's going to do, a good job for you and do it right. Yeah, I mean, rather than actually have many tools that are doing nothing for you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fairly significant lesson in terms of what we're doing. Robert?
And just sort of beyond not doing anything for you, but it's being aware of the risk of legacy services or services which just present a huge risk, and particularly in this world of frontier AI attacking models. So if you can optimize, right size, and make sure that what you've got is latest technology, patched, up to date, monitored. You got your people, process, technology all over it. And then you're fighting fit as much as you can be to deal with some of these evolving risks.
Yeah, and then what we can see from that though is that more recently there was an organization that took its responsibilities fairly seriously at a board level. They bought a tool, but what they didn't do was resource it. And ultimately they paid a price because it wasn't, they just wasn't configured. It wasn't there. It wasn't operational, as it were.
This is something I see. So whether it's I'm in a war room when there's an attack going down, or, doing tabletop exercises, especially back when I used to do hyper realistic, like people in the room with an actual hacker on the other side doing the attacking. We would start the exercise with, how do you configure your systems back in your office? And then we'd be given this best practice checklist, and you knew that they'd been with one of the big four, and there was always telltales which big four it was based on the checklist. And then you'd straight away go, right, so you just had an EY best practice checklist, didn't you? Or best practice assessment, didn't you? How much did you pay? Holy shit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to run the first section of this cyber warfare exercise, so a full emulation of cyber warfare on an environment that they've requested. And you'd be sitting in the room with them, and 45 minutes goes by, they start getting bored and start talking about cars or something. And you turn around and go, guys, have you identified anything yet? And their question is, well, when does this attack start? It's like, well, we've been in for 45 minutes. By the time they start to do something, they're owned. And then that's where we come in and go, right, so this is the problem with managing by best practice versus managing by what you understand and the tools you actually have. So instead of giving us your best practice checklist, let's configure this for how you operate back at work. And then the moment we reconfigured it to how they operate it back at work, they were actually able to start to visualize the attack. They're actually able to start seeing things. And that's where I say security by obscurity is like, if you go in to the point about buying the latest and greatest, but not configuring it correctly or not having people available to manage it, then you can actually make it easier for an attacker to hide in plain sight if you don't have the skill set to manage to the level that you've got implemented. And that's where, again, identity and access, thinking very carefully about how you actually deploy right fit, right size security for your organization, because just because it's the best thing for ANZ Bank or, Suncorp Insurance, it doesn't mean it suits your business when you're a tenth of the size of those guys.
I think that takes us into the next area of conversation that I wanted to go down, which was 47% of cloud data is encrypted. So only 47% of cloud data is encrypted. So would any board be comfortable knowing over half of their cloud data is unencrypted? Well, I suppose in some respects it's a so what question, but in another respect, there's quite a key thing here. I mean, key management. You've got Pajong. Yeah. So what we're beginning to sort of like realize is that, key management's taken very seriously in certain industry sectors. Yeah. Highly regulated, highly complex. And, is if key management's done right, is done right in those industries, the banking and finance and the health and so on and so forth.
Sorry, did you say done correctly and health in the same sentence?
Well, yeah, you've got to hope so, right? I mean, my health record would be would be out there as part of it. So, but it adds to operational complexity is the first thing. And these things have all been brought out as part of this report, and they're sort of like basically saying, look, only 47%. Yeah, but I mean, there's 47% because there's PII data, there's intellectual property data, there's all sorts of other bits and pieces, but there's certain data classifications that you just don't need to key manage them, do you? I mean, it'd be bloody expensive to do it, wouldn't it?
Well, imagine what we were talking about on the one of the previous podcasts, all the retail data. If you had to put that under key management, imagine the cost. So
it'd be expensive. So, I mean, Robert, where do we draw the line here? Is the line being drawn at the moment at a sensible level, or is there more that we should be doing, or from a governance, risk, and compliance perspective?
There's always going to be
on your
more.
industry.
Yeah, it's always going to be more, but it's back to basics, isn't it? So, how many organizations and how many do we know? And the answer is going to be less than 47% or whatever it is who do data classification properly. So, and actually figure out, okay, so what is the important data that here we go. So, what is the important data that we need to look at encrypting? So, personal, sensitive, confidential, and actually probably go through. Identify what that data is and classify it, but also actually understand where that sits within the organization all the way through to backup. Now, again, most organizations are not able to do that sort of basic classification data governance process, but that's where you've got to start. And then once you've done that, it might be that for some organizations, 47% encrypted in cloud is perfectly fine because that is your crown jewels of data which needs to be protected. The rest of it is just a bunch of numbers that don't really mean anything. So again, it depends on the organization, but you've actually got to start with the basics first in terms of data governance.
Yeah, I mean, it's when it's all Adam's phone number, it's okay because he can field the calls. But
yeah, if you think that you have data classification sorted, you can hit me up at iamoncrack@chatdps.com.au. So no, I don't think there's anyone who can honestly put their hand on their heart and say that their data classification is sorted. And if they can, again, feel free to reach out to us. We're very easy to find. But because I actually want to learn how you did it, because we have yet to have a situation where we walk into an organization and say, you have data classification and DLP locked?
Yeah, but one of the problems there, and I'm going to point it out, is the fact that, experience is telling me that everybody loves, we got Purview. And Purview is the Microsoft tool, yeah? But what happens when you've got, Linux and other systems, Oracle or what have you, as part of your makeup? Because Purview isn't going to give you a damned insight upon anything that's going on with those guys, right?
Look, Purview does a good job. And insecurity, if you can do 80%, if you can get 80% right, it's good. And it's pretty good, right? But then there is a reason, and there's a lot of different areas where Microsoft does a really good job. So Defender, we're all in agreement. Defender does a great job, and you can hang your hat on Defender as a strategy. We all agree that Microsoft's inbuilt capability around email is really good, but there's a reason why we have tools that plug into Microsoft and have a better together with Microsoft story. And I think, we can all argue that Microsoft's not a security company, and we can all agree with each other on different levels about how we feel about Microsoft as a security company. But what you can agree on is that if Microsoft wasn't able to deliver a good enough product in security, then there wouldn't be a market for organizations that plug into Microsoft to just make up that extra 20% Microsoft doesn't do. So if Purview is your strategy, great, but then look at, for your use case and the right fit for your business, what can you put in that works with Purview to enhance to your use case? Just like with email, we would talk about, there's stuff like Abnormal plugs into Microsoft for email to give you amazing insights, or other vendors. Proofpoint's another one that has an API that plugs into Microsoft now to give you that pre-filtering. So, and then, Checkpoint even has something that's amazing at it. So, not that I talk about products very often, but there's a reason why there's a really good better together with Microsoft story across many components of the stack. And the reason I'm harping about that is back to right fit, right size for your organization. It's very easy to find people who are really good at operating Microsoft products and then add the capability below it to make up that gap for your specific use case. And Rob, but I'm happy for you to disagree with me because you have a very GRC lens on things.
Well, I mean, let's just push back a little bit, because I think I would say that it is easy for people to say, let's flick on Defender and Purview and we're good, and not think about, do I have the right level of licensing? Have I actually configured these particular products in the right way? Am I actually doing an audit on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis, whatever it might be, to actually see whether that product is doing what I want it to do? And so I think there's a tendency because there's such a reliance on O365 product suite, just to kind of flick it on and then set and forget, and everything's okay, she'll be right. Whereas I think there needs to be, more levels, more layers involved to actually say, to trust is good, to check is better. And so to actually do the checks and making sure that those products are actually working.
And that the key point you made there is set and forget. And that's my biggest bugbear. It's also the reason we have a job, because people do dumb shit, right? So set and forget is a great thing for the cybersecurity industry, but it is. We used to talk about cycles of looking at things on an annual basis. Then we moved to, you should look at it biannually. Then we started saying you should look at it quarterly. I think we've proven that because of frontier modeling, you can't look enough. You can't review enough. So there needs to be some level of cadence put in, and a sensible cadence put in to ensure that things are tuned correctly, because a lot of these tools that you already have on the shelf will do a very adequate job of protection. But to the point we made very early on in this piece, there's not a lot of tuning of the product that's on the shelf to suit the exact use case of the organization that it's sitting in the shelf of. And then the ongoing management of it is just not up to scratch, especially at the speed of disruption we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Look, guys, I think that we had planned to go a lot further than this, but I think that what we've done is run out of time. I think what we need to do is revisit some of these things again, and maybe next week, maybe the week after. I don't really know, but there's an awful lot of learnings in here. And I mean, if you used it as a crystal ball, what's become apparent is the fact that the crystal ball was actually pretty much on point. These things have happened. AI is directing the pace of change. It's out ahead of the game. And as you've so eloquently put it, Adam, this has changed us from, sort of like annual change to, half yearly change to quarterly change. We're now in constant change. And the only constant that we've got in our lives at this moment in time is change. So on that note, I'd just like to say that was ChatDPS for this week. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.